And I see the red dot in place, so we're live. Norman, thank you so much for saying yes. And good morning to you. Good morning to you, sir. How are you today?
I'm doing very well. Thank you, Kofi. It's lovely to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
No, I had to. I think once we had our initial conversation and got to unpack some of what you did, I didn't want to keep it all to myself. I thought that there may be people certainly in my network that hadn't had the fortune of getting to know you. So let's spread the word. Let's spread the word. So
So,
that's what we should do. Now, if it's all right with you, I'd love to do a bit of an introduction, just to sort of set the context, which of course we'll build onto. Would that be okay if I just did a
so
brief introduction to you?
please.
Yeah. All right. So thank you everyone for tuning in, wherever you are in the world, whatever time of day it is. Welcome to Coffee with Kofi, where we slow things down, grab a cup of coffee or some other beverage, and have real conversations with people who are shaping how we think, how we work, and indeed how we lead. Today, I'm really delighted to be sitting down with Norman Wolfe, who's a leadership coach, an author, and founder of Quantum Leaders, which has been going for some almost 40 years now, if I'm not mistaken. Is that right?
By the world.
Wow. So incredible. Beyond this, Norman has spent decades helping leaders rethink and see organizations quite interestingly. So not as machines to be optimized, but as living systems built on relationships, purpose, and human potential. So for me, this conversation isn't about hype. It isn't about noise. It's a thoughtful one about leadership, the mistakes, the meaning, and what it takes to build organizations that work for the people within them, but also perform, most importantly. So grab your drink, whatever that may be, and let's sip into some inspiration. How was that, Norman?
That's lovely, Kofi. Thank you so much. I really appreciate the introduction. Yes, it has been quite a number of years. I've been gifted with being able to, how should I say, come to an understanding that hopefully will help society, businesses, business leaders, employees, um, really have a more positive experience and a much more positive set of outcomes in this endeavor we call business, enterprise, career, whatever we're doing, whether it's an individual or a large corporation or that's matter.
And it's important and really meaningful work because it's well documented. Most of us spend most of our time engaged in some form of work in exchange for our time. So yeah, we'll come on to it for sure. I know we will because it's one of the main reasons why I want you here. But I'm fascinated by your journey to now, to here and now, and just wondered whether you could share a summary of the genesis of Norman. I love a biblical reference, me, so I like the genesis of Norman. If you wouldn't mind just giving us sort of an elevated pitch as to where you came from, where you are in the world now, because I think that would really set the scene, you know?
Well, I guess the best place to start is in my early career because that really, in many ways, unconsciously set a tone for what I was going to focus on my career. It has to do with starting my career as a young engineer, Pratt& Whitney at Connecticut, uh, fresh out of school, eager, excited about the opportunities of getting into the workforce, making a contribution. Um, I remember early on, one of the experiences I had that kind of, I don't want to say shook my world because it wasn't that significant. It had a real impact on me was when my supervisor was talking to another coworker and made the statement, you know, when you come to work, you leave your personal life at the door.
Mm.
And little did I know that that was really a deeply ingrained uh, framework, belief system, mindset that uh, companies ran by. It was further enhanced only, like, that's maybe 6, 9 months after that episode. Group of us were talking, we were having lunch and talking about how much we loved our work because how great it was and how excited we were to come to work every day. Another supervisor came in and said, work is not supposed to be fun. If it was fun, you'd pay the company what do you think this is? Disneyland? Workers work. It's like,
Oh, wow.
this is, so you can imagine this, you might call it cognitive dissonance, this kind of confusion. Um, it's like, why is it that way? So a question was planted, you might say.
Mm.
And then as I began my career I moved out of Pratt & Whitney, went to work for Hewlett Packard. This was back in 1973. So this was the stage of HP that was moving into a very high growth period, very what we might call iconic HP, rooted in the HP way that people knew about that then, and a great company to work for. And I had my first opportunity to move into management, and I had this really innate sense that I would be good at managing organizations and leading people because I really cared about them. I cared about what they wanted to accomplish. In my first year as manager, my performance review was unacceptable in every category. So sort of enough thrown in my life, right, to make me stop and reflect. What am I doing? I thought I'd be really good at this, and I'm failing terribly. And I was going to go back to being a technical person because I was obviously very good at that. And I got a lot of coaching and mentoring to stick with it. And so that set me on the course of what's going on in the world of business and leadership, what that I'm not understanding. Why is it so difficult? What's driving the way organizations operate and the way people are in organizations? But I continued through my career at HP. I could stay in management. I've learned a lot about leadership and organizations. I was responsible in my last position. We're taking a very large organization, about 1,200 people, 13 Western states, 17 branch officers. That was really a poor performing organization. I think we were ranked last in the country, maybe even in the world. A terribly performing organization. I was given the opportunity to see if I could do something about it because nobody else could. And in 3 years, and asked it around to be an organization that everybody else in the world was coming to understand what did I do that made this organization so good. And so obviously I learned some stuff. Now I learned it organically. I did really have a framework to explain what I did, at least not at that time. But I took my experiences at HP. I decided to leave and go out into the world on my own, to leave the corporate world. And so in 1988 is when I started consulting. And I had a lot of, I didn't really have a focus. Like I wasn't a salesperson who was going to train other salespeople or marketing guru, or I was a organization leadership that can make organizations perform well. And so with that, I got involved with lots of different opportunities, mergers and acquisitions and turnarounds and strategy planning and business process reengineering, just a whole magnitude, new product development, marketing. I, I had opportunities to address many, many different areas of business. The pivotal point began to happen in my life, but I shouldn't say pivotal, maybe focusing point was in 2002. Number of transitions, personal, business wise, was going on, and I wanted to refocus my consulting instead of just being what I might call opportunistic. I wanted to focus in on what I was going to be doing next.
Right.
And I talked to a client and asked him, you hire me in years now. Why you keep hiring me? And he says, "Oh, Norman, that's easy. You help me execute faster." So those words became my focus. I help organizations execute more effectively. What I discovered when I started down that path is how poor we are at executing. It, you mentioned earlier that most of us spend, the statistics are widely known, most of us spend majority of our time in our careers. the statistics showed at that time that 70% of companies fail to execute strategy.
Yeah.
And 70% of employees are disengaged.
Mm.
Set up another cognitive dissonance and curiosity in my mind is, why is that so when we have a wealth of knowledge of leadership and management and motivation and psychology and communication and every field of endeavor we need emotional intelligence with? I mean, we know what's necessary. Why aren't we moving that needle? And here it is, almost 2 decades later, statistics still haven't shows.
No.
I was in a conversation with a woman about just getting to know each other. Like, what do you do? And I told her I help organizations execute more effectively. I'm a consultant. I work with leaders of organizations. She asked me a question everybody hates being asked. Waste. What makes you different?
So I guess in a way, what is your USP and differentiator in a marketplace where,
Why are you different than other consultants?
yeah.
And my response is what really finally put me on the path I've been on now for over a decade and a half. I said, I see organizations differently. I see them as living entities. They've got a soul, they've got a purpose. They're alive, they're meaningful, they operate like people, not like machines. I didn't prep that. I didn't have that as my, unique selling proposition. It's just emanated from me in response to a question. And her words were, wow, you should go write a book about that. Well, 7 years after that, um, 2 years of struggling with now an author, 5 years of finally giving in and writing the book. I wrote the book, The Living Organization. It explains how things change if you change the paradigm of how you think about what a business is. What happens if you stop thinking of it as a machine? Leader's job is to design the machine, control the machine, optimize the machine, make the machine as efficient as possible. And people's role is to be a really good contributing component of the machine. That's the template of thinking, if you will, mindset of how organizations.
And I was going to say, Norm, if I may, it resonates with me because there's a book, Principles, by Ray Dalio, a fellow countryman of yours, and I think he very much subscribes to that view that you use data to understand and improve processes, and essentially the quality of the inputs gives you the best output. So the quality of the questions that you ask makes for better decisions, etc. So very much process driven.
Yes.
Almost scientific. But where did that idea, I mean, I know you said it just emanated, but this idea, because yours is this is why I really wanted to talk to you, because yours is more, how can I say, it's holistic. It's almost steeped in nature and what the natural world does. But so where did that idea sort of sprout from and then grow, essentially?
Yeah. So you're right. My view of organizations is, think of it as if it's a person.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's the question, how do you make a person effective at achieving the goals or dreams or visions that they want? And that puts you in a different mindset. Where did that come from? Well, throughout my life, my personal desire in life was to understand a burning question. Why do I get the outcomes I get in my life? Why do I get some things happen? It seems like almost miraculously. I thought about this and all of a sudden it's here, right? And other times I set goals and I want to go for it and this is what I want to accomplish. And it's a struggle. It's, oh God, painful. And never happens. And I end up going someplace else. What causes that? Why? Basically the question, how do we get the results we get, and how do we get more of what we want, less of what we don't want? Very human, personal journey of discovery into that question. Uh, and so that journey took me, again, on a very personal level, from understanding efficiency, you might say. How do I get myself organized better, and how do I not waste time, and how do I get things done in a rational, logical way? And that makes some changes in my life. Better time management, not wasting time or energy, focusing, getting my focus on what I want to accomplish, not being distracted and all of that. That didn't get me the whole way there. So without going through all the various discoveries I made, it's sort of like almost like a physical, psychological, relational, spiritual journey, getting deeper and deeper into what makes humans be human.
I like that. I like that.
And then when I began to realize that organizations are people, my whole journey is a bit about taking everything I've learned about what makes humans humans, and makes humans create what we create, and apply it to organizations. That's really the essence of bulletin organization.
And it does make sense, when you think of it in that way, because any organization really is a collection of humans, coming together for a shared goal or mission, isn't it? So yes, there's complexities in there. And I was thinking about, in this increasingly interconnected world, you can have cultural nuances within that, because now the workforce isn't just from the country that the business is operating in necessarily, with the hybrid and stuff, which I'll come on to, because I want to ask you about that as well. But I wanted to ask you another question, which was around an observation I've had, where some leaders are obsessed with driving activity and metrics, and your focus is really more on the relationships and the context, the human side of it. And why do you think that the relationships are so vital in business?
Well, first of all, I want to correct something. You presented it as some people on this side, activity, efficiency, process, data, and my work seems to be more on this people-centric side. Actually, my work is eliminating that bifurcation that is so common in all of our thinking. And where is the intersection? Where are those two things integrated? Because reality is, the activity is still very important. We want to be efficient. We want to be focused. We want to have goals. We want to have process, metrics, and all of those things. They don't go. Again, if you think about a human being, right? We want to have our bodies physically, our physiology to be healthy. We don't want, inflammations. We don't want disease. We want to have a healthy body. That's our physiology. In this framework of thinking, what makes humans behave the way they do, or more deeply, what makes other humans create the outcomes we create. Activity is a very important part. If we don't do stuff, nothing gets done. And we want to do that stuff with the least amount of wasted energy. That's just normal and natural. So activity is, we don't want to throw that out. But if you look at a machine, that machine paradigm, for those why leaders like Ray is so obsessed with that, is that's what that matters. The assumption is the machine is designed right. It will take inputs and efficiently produce outputs. That's being framework. Humans have that component part, as I mentioned, but we also have other elements to us. For example, if I am in a anxious state of being, if I am, this simple example, just got into a disagreement with my wife, and it's weighing on me. I'm thinking about it. It's upset me. My energy of doing stuff is going to go way down.
Yeah.
Right? I'm not going to be focused. I'm not going to be committed. I'm going to be drained. My personal life cannot be left at the door. Go back to what I said earlier. Right? It's going to come into work. if we have a team that's trusting and supportive, people in that team are going to feel highly energized. If I am in a team where I feel people are sniping at me and my work isn't appreciated and the relationships are all clouded, my work's going to be less than optimal.
You're right. Yeah.
So when it comes to people, relationship energy, if you will, is a very important part of what I do. It has a big impact on what I do. There's a third element that happens with humans. It actually happens with machines too, and living systems. This mechanism within us that forces us to respond to life's events. In I call it our context, right? That part of us that has, through our life experiences, evolved into a set of instructions, if you will. That when Kofi says this, or Kofi looks at me this way, or uh, Kofi invites me to this, I'm going to respond based on what? A whole set of stories, narratives, beliefs, assumptions that what within me, right? Machines have that too, but machines respond based on their design, and it's externally created. The designer puts the instructions, designs the machine, and the machine just follows along. Um, when it comes to humans, when it comes to people, we have this thing called context, which actually determines our behaviors, whether it be our relationship interactions or the activity we do. The context determines how we're going to choose which response to give to a life event. If you put that in the context of creating results, in the machine, all I have to do is optimize the design, reorganize and move things around, change roles and responsibilities, set new goals for it to achieve. The goal in doing that is to prepare the machine to stop producing outcome A and produce a different outcome B. When it comes to a organization thought of as a person, so now how do you get people to change what they're doing that's producing outcome A into producing outcome B? Because that's the goal, right? We got a strategy, we got new goals, whatever. We want to go from A to B. Well, that means we have to change behaviors. Can't do the same behaviors expecting a different outcome.
No.
So we know we have to change behaviors, but the piece that's left out is it's not just our activity that we want to change. It's how we relating to people? What's our interaction dynamics? How does that have to change? And more importantly, to change behaviors, they have to understand the underlying context. That's the driving force of the existing behaviors. What's the narrative and story people have about why they're behaving that way? It's all the context behavior, all the behaviors. Let me rephrase that. The context we have developed is a set of rules that will make us behave in a way that we believe will create safety and success.
Got you. Safety and success.
So, I'm optimized to produce, to respond to life events that's going to give me this outcome. And that's what I want. That's what I desire. That's success, or that's safe, or a combination of that. Same thing is true in organizations. Organizations optimize themselves with a set of narratives, stories. I'd say when this happens, this is how you behave. Let me bring it to a concrete example. When I took over the administrative organization to do with that, it had a lot of concerns about the behaviors of our order processing people. They weren't being customer caring enough.
Mm-hmm.
So I visit my various branch offices and listen and observe, ask questions, and try to get what's causing you to do this? And I found a relatively simple answer. Their context. Success was defined by being very efficient in processing orders. So we get the orders done in a timely manner, and we're highly productive. Makes sense. It's a good metric. In that construct, in that context, there was another narrative. When customers call, that's an interruption to my process flow. So customers are now an interruption to what's going to make me successful.
I see.
Right? So they have a narrative, right? What I had to do was change the narrative. I had to change the context. I had to reframe customer calling is not an interruption. It's the reason you exist. And we had to change that narrative, create the results we wanted, which were customers having a positive experience went into that goal with the sales organization.
That's brilliant. That's brilliant. Thank you, Norman. And I honestly, Richard, the history and the depth of your experience, that I know we could certainly expand even further on that. But to cover some other things, I want to ask you another question, if I may.
Yeah.
And I think it's something that I picked up from our previous conversation, but just also researching around. I feel that there is an openness to learn from mistakes in the way that you've sort of built your life, from getting into management and it not working out, but you persevered, and that really strikes a chord with me. And it definitely comes up a lot, I'm sure, for you too, in the coaching conversations that I will have. So if you are to look back, like, what is sort of one mistake within the professional capacity that really changed how you thought about coaching, or indeed led the teams that you were able to lead in the past? Does that make sense?
If I understand the question, it's what experience triggered me to shift from thinking about people in one way and thinking about the importance of encouraging mistakes.
Yeah. So it's essentially you're on the right track. It's really, I feel like as you've evolved, you've gathered information from your experiences and things that didn't go to plan. So I'm thinking, when it came to maybe your early role of management and it didn't go to plan, I'm curious as to what was it that wasn't working that you were able to then adapt to think about what you now do very differently to how you did back then.
Wow, so many bits and pieces. One of the things I learned early in that episode, I entered the field of management and coaching with sort of a naivety. If you care for people and help them understand what we needed to do together, they will do it. The organization I took over was also unique in the sales region in that we each had our own profit and loss statement. So I found myself running a $10 million business. I remember saying to my boss at the time, I don't understand P&L. And he said, it's simple. It's like balancing a checkbook. And I said, what makes you think I balance my checkbook? There was assumptions made about my needs and his ability to coach me that was way off. So one of the things I learned was not to make assumptions about what people are capable or even desirous to do. Just because they need a position or a title doesn't necessarily mean that what I'm expecting of them is doable. So I had to learn how to connect more, and that's just one aspect. It really broadened into learning how to connect with each individual on my team, better understand who they were as a person and what was driving them, which I didn't have this notion of activity, relationship, and context that I have now as a framework. It's just I began to realized that there was something else going on in this notion of helping people become better. I also had an experience, again, sort of, I mean, there's so many of these little experiences that framed my thinking. I was giving a performance review to one of my managers, and I was evaluating him with poor judgment. And he challenged me. He said, "How can you evaluate me on poor judgment?" I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "Look, given what I knew, given the understanding I had, given the data I had, given the experience I had, I made the best judgment call I could."
Okay. What'd you say to that?
So I said, it threw me for a loop, and I said, "Okay, yes, that's true. So the issue is not that you made a bad judgment call given what you knew. The issue is you didn't know what you should have known given the responsibilities you have. So how can we fix that?" So I mean, it really began to shape this notion of the uniqueness of people. And we're not homogeneous component parts that you can plug in or plug out. There's something unique going on within the people. And so those are some of the early experiences I've had, which only kept getting reinforced and driving me to find solutions. I mean, honestly, my response to them, I don't think was probably really that good at that time. So constantly looking for learning. I mean, you say, the importance of learning. I had a manager, one of the general managers I reported to throughout my career, and he came in and he had his first team meeting, and I remember him saying, "I just want to set the stage. There's something important for everybody on this team to understand. I expect everybody to make the same mistake once." And the message he was trying to communicate was we don't learn if it's not okay making mistakes. But you end up learning from that. Don't keep making the same mistake over and over again.
Yeah.
And that's another one of those early career moments that helped me begin to frame what's important when it comes to leadership. Setting the stage setting the stage where I, as a leader, understand them and what's driving them and what's holding them back. Uh, Setting the stage to encourage them to take risks, to take ownership for their actions, to make mistakes, to learn from them. These were all part of my learnings during HP. And then as a coach, when I began to consult and coach other leaders, what gets in their way from doing that? Most people don't understand. We easily say, "Hey, leaders should do this and leaders should do that," but they don't take into account the humanity of the leader. Leaders are charged with a responsibility, and it's really, really difficult. It was brought home to me by a client that was invited to his annual company offsite picnic, and he invited, customers and suppliers and family members. I remember it was in Newport Beach, California. We were walking along the beach, and he said to me, "Woman, you see all those people, workers, employees of ours, suppliers of ours, their families." He said, "Every decision I make has the potential impact of either making their lives better or worse."
Boy.
It's that statement kind of gave me that sense of humanity. What does it mean to be a leader of an organization? Carrying the burden, if you will, of the weight of that, knowing that decisions could affect the lives of all those people.
And it's so true. And I think Spider-Man, but with great power comes great responsibility. And in corporate structures, the leaders have the power to make decisions that do have an impact on people's lives. And going back a little bit, I like the sharing that you did around the assumptions that you had. I'm picking that, setting the stall, but also allowing room for mistakes to encourage in my view, innovation. And you know, for me, there is this cognitive dissonance or disconnect with organizations that say that they want people to take risks, but then often, as I've observed, individuals within the organization do not feel safe or empowered to take those risks.
Yeah.
So you get this sort of protectionism going on where people will not push the boat too far, will not say things that they don't see are right. So from your perspective, what do you think helps companies change that culture so they can really embrace that iterative learning approach that really does make for innovation, you know?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it goes to one of the things I was hinting at earlier, working with leaders over the years, asking the question, why don't they behave the way we would like them to? And why do employees behave the way they do? This defensiveness or protectionism. If you put it through the lens of you're not dealing with machine parts, but you're dealing with humans, you come to, in what I said earlier, all humans want to achieve a sense of success and achieve and feel safe in their life. People don't like living life, always thinking something bad's going to happen to them. We want, I call it security, call it safety, call it whatever you want, but there's a sense where we can feel we can breathe and for life. Our society, and I can't speak throughout all of the world because I haven't traveled everywhere, but generally the Western society that I'm familiar with has for a long time put strong emphasis on what I call uh, expertise.
Mm.
And what I mean by that is we tend to work very hard to become known as an expert in something. I'm really good at real estate. I'm really good at coding. I'm really good at, I'm an expert in marketing, right? We sort of measure our success by that. Um, there's a trap in expertise, which goes something like this. I've reached expertise, but expertise only lasts so long in life. The life's always changing, right? Being an expert, the buggy whip maker doesn't make up a lot of value in today's world. And with AI, everything's changing. So expertise has a finite lifespan, which means we have to move from expertise to novice. We have to go from knowing everything about something to knowing nothing about what's coming next. That's a very awkward place for people to be.
So true.
Because now I'm no longer at the pinnacle, I'm at the bottom. Well, the nature of life is just that. You're always starting over into something new all the time. But we're not rewarded for that. We're not encouraged in that. We're acknowledged for our expertise. So stepping down into newness, if you will, is generally resisted because first of all, it has all this uncertainty. Second of all, I'm now in a period of ineffectiveness. I'm no longer efficient, and the machine demands efficiency. So again, it's this whole paradigm of mechanistic role of life where everybody has to be a specialist, an expert in something that is valuable so they can have a nice, safe, secure life with the day. That whole mindset is unconsciously a byproduct of this mechanistic orientation we have to work and life. We even try to apply it to our life.
I see what you mean. I really do. Because, you know, there are some instances where I've been privy to in public, people will not into corporate meetings will not ask the question that everyone else is thinking, but privately they will ask the question, but people want to present as if they have, to your point, the expertise. But it's really fascinating when I think about it in relation to the journey of becoming a coach personally, to put myself in here a little bit. because what you said really, really resonated. I'd gone from being an expert in a field and transitioning into a new field and feeling like I must have the answers. Because in my former life, I was asked by senior leaders to solve problems that they had with their hiring needs in their senior teams. And so I was like, well, I know this is the way we could do it, and I'll present those solutions. As a coach, as you know, I have no idea the capabilities of my coachee or their preferred way of doing what it is that they want to do towards their goals. So I remember in my training just thinking, this is wild, because I kind of want to be prepared, but nothing prepares you for what is going to meet you. And I think if this resonates with practice, you get comfortable sitting in that, not knowing, understanding and trusting your essence will find that way to connect with the other person's essence, and the words will come. So let go of I must know to I must just be, and I must hear and respond accordingly to what is being presented. Does that make sense? I've kind of gone on a detour, but
You really nailed it well, Kofi. We actually teach a skill we call improv mindset. I was blessed. My wife is many years, over 2 decades in the improvisation world, improvisation theater. She trained others. She was a troupe director for a while. So when I met her, she was still involved in that activity, and I began to get exposed to the world of improvisation, and not just improvisation comedy that many people know, improvisation. And what you described is really what they try to teach in improvisation, and is we learn to get comfortable with not knowing what's going to come at you, and being able to respond to it from someplace within you that knows the right answer. And you can learn along the way. So we actually teach that as a skill to leaders and to organizations, because what you describe is an absolutely critical element of being able to face the world we're in, with so much is changing. I mean, imagine you're living in a world and all of a sudden this new tool called AI comes about. And now you're in this place where your expertise isn't what's valuable anymore. What do you do? And this is part of what's causing this angst that so many people are experiencing, because they haven't learned what you learned in your journey. It's okay not to know that we as human beings have this phenomenal capacity to discover and create and innovate, if you're just okay not knowing for a while, to allow discovery to happen. But again, if you go back to the framework of the society we live in, which is you're part of a machine, your value is what you can bring. I mean, even think about how people prepare for interviews. You talked about hiring, right? What's my resume? What's my credentials? Behavioral interviewing. Show me you've done this before, so that I'm going to respond the way I'm going to need it. I mean, everything is predicated on you being expert in something. And life doesn't value expertise. Life values adaptability. Paradigm. The machine paradigm is designed to, because we're focused on efficiency and optimization, you really don't want variability. You want to eliminate variability and chaos, so you highlight predictability. Predictability requires knowing, so again, expertise becomes important. Problem with life doesn't operate on predictability.
no, it does not. It does not.
Right? And we're constantly being thrown into that more and more frequently. I mean, if you look at the frequency of significant changes happening in life, it's just getting faster. They're coming closer and closer together. It might have taken, back in the 1900s, 20, 30 years for some significant change to happen. You look at the end of the 20th century and the beginning of this century, the last couple of decades, and we've had experienced changes from the internet to social media to the Great Recession to the COVID to now AI. in less than 2 decades. Look at all the changes we've had. Significant changes that are disruptive. So I think about that, adaptability.
I hear you. I think that is high up on the list of, if you want to call them, meta skills that not just leaders need, but all of us really need. Because I think what past performance, in, as they say in financial services, is no indicator of future performance. And I don't know if it comes up for you much, but what I've come to see is that that desire for security that you talk about will sometimes lead people to think to what is familiar, even if they're suffering in that familiarity, rather than face the unknown and go into a position where you may be a novice, but then through, much like we learn how to walk as babies, through progression, rising and falling, we get to this place where we're propelled by a new form of motion, from crawling to walking to running to riding bikes to skateboarding to doing all these things. We had to suck at some point before we got to the next bit. But somehow, some way, as we experience life, it becomes harder sometimes to allow ourselves to suck, to become good at what we end up becoming good at,
But if you follow that pattern, but it's a never ending change cycles, right? There's an upward movement, like you said, from falling to walking to running to skateboarding to driving to flying to whatever, right? But each one of those, when you started that new evolution in your capability, you started off sucking at it. You started off not being able. You mentioned that falling and getting up and falling and getting up. My daughter sent me a little video of my granddaughter who was just learning to walk when she was 1 year old. I love the video. What I loved about it is she'd get up, unbalanced, and fall off. But she didn't just fall down. She laughed. That was fun. Look at me. Look at me. I'm getting up and falling down. She just laughed and laughed. And wouldn't it be nice if people learn how to do that throughout their life? Look at me, I'm failing. Yay, I'm learning something new. This is great. Instead of, oh no. I remember I had a friend, we were part of a management team. We had an offsite. We went off to a ski resort. And one of the managers never skied before. And I said, oh, it's just great. You're loving. And we took lessons. I saw him later on. I said, how'd it go? He says, oh, I gave up. Why? I kept falling down. I couldn't get it. And these little kids were doing better than me. Wanted to say, so fall down more, get up more, fall down more, get up more. Eventually, you figure out we stop ourselves from growing because of our fear of looking stupid or being less than perfect. We have to be perfect until we're less than perfect.
No, and I do. You dovetailed into the thoughts and the feelings that I have, and it is. I see it like with an organization in a leadership role. The cost of getting it wrong can be high. The scrutiny that you're under can be high, and therefore can encourage playing it safe and not making space for mistakes. I do get that, but I think what you and I are sharing here is that if that journey to evolution can be made enjoyable, unlike what your previous manager said, that why are you having fun here? This is work. If it can be made enjoyable and people can bring their whole selves into it, I really see the scope for humans beating the machine, essentially, the organism beating the idea behind machine thinking, because the limits to our creativity are just limitless, essentially. But the conditions for that to thrive feels like they need to be right. They need to be right so that people can feel they can volunteer things and move forward, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I want to circle back on something because this is really important. We talked about what we like. We like environments where people can feel safe, make mistakes, etc. Also acknowledge that in business, making mistakes could be dangerous, right? It could be devastating. and that a leader's responsibility is to a greater collective of people, not only the employees, but the welfare of the organization as a whole. And sometimes that doesn't necessarily align with each individual person in the organization. So one of the things I try to help leaders understand, and this again is the shift in paradigm. If you think about your organization as a person, and you know that the best way to help this person become more effective at achieving even greater goals is to develop both capability and maturity. Be allowed is what gives us that ability to be okay with chaos, that to be okay with uncertainty, to be okay with different points of view in a multicultural environment we live in. So maturity is an important element. And if you begin to think about the raising children and how you help them develop, that there's a certain balance between telling them what to do, like when they're very young. You want to give them very tight boundaries, right? Because they don't got, but you don't want to hold them in that. But you want to keep expanding the boundaries as they grow. And you want to look at them as not being component parts that you want to make efficient, but as developing entities that you want to help grow and develop. So the journey is, there's always a risk per parent, if you think about it, where, going to the teenage world, when do I give them the keys to the car? That's a risky decision for a parent. That's really no different than the leader saying, when do I allow these people to make decisions on their own for the good of the public? See, the same risk reward equation, if you will, it's identical, and it's a human equation. It's a human challenge, and we figure it out in parenting. Not always good, but eventually we learn, we try, we experiment. And so I help leaders understand their role. It's not about just giving people freedom for freedom's sake. There's this element of maturity that has to be taken into account. So it's a balance. It's like I said earlier, the living organization framework isn't just about people. It's about the integration of getting the results done, taking care of the organization, making sure it's growing and being effective, but also doing it in a way that gets the people to contribute more and more by growing their capability and maturity. So I just wanted to bring that balance back into our conversation, because it's really us coaches to get really into the human development side of things, and we forget our
Makes sense. It is multi-layered, multifaceted. There's the nuance that comes with us as humans within that as well, which I love. And we will do more of these conversations for sure, because I can't believe how I've been so mesmerized by what we've been discussing. I'm now just taking a look down and gone, oh my goodness, we've almost been talking for an hour, which is just the adage, time flies when you're having fun. That is what this conversation has been. But sorry?
I would love to come back and continue the conversation, especially the second book of the Living Organization trilogy is going to be coming out later this year, probably around June. It's all about leadership skills. Is how do leaders lead a living organization? So we can continue this conversation.
Oh, I'd love that. I'd love that. And I know you may need to go shortly, but there's one last question that I think I'd love to ask just to close things off, which is, taking everything you've learned, if you were sitting across from a younger version of yourself, perhaps with a coffee in hand, we keep on brand, what advice would you give him about leadership that you wish you'd learned sooner?
We didn't get into this much, but it has to do with recognizing there's that part of it that is logical and rational, analyzes, organizes, makes decision based on data. The objective part of us. And that's pretty much how I was trained growing up. I was an engineer, so and a computer scientist, so you can imagine my training. And I would advise him to cultivate the subjective part of him as well, to be objective and subjective. Don't dismiss the intuitional, the insightful, the inspirational. Don't even miss value of what you're sensing and feeling, even if you can't logically make sense out of it. The way I would say it today is learn to balance and integrate the head and the heart.
That is brilliant. I knew, see, this, when we spoke, I was like, we have to do this because I feel exactly what you say insofar as, and more so these days than before, maybe because I'm not trying to be an expert now. I'm every day is a learning day, but I will go with my intuition, but then I'll overlay that intuition with some logical exploration. So it isn't purely just a feeling situation by which I make decisions of what to do, what not to do. But there is some, if you want to call it, the sort of qualitative side that comes into it when I'm doing the analysis. And I think that mastering that blend is really crucial because I think that's what makes us human at the end of the day. You know, we're capable of, I was going to use some fantasies, but we're capable of brilliance, but also some BS and everything in between. And so it's just accepting, leaning into that. But like you say, subjective looks with the objective, and not dismissing all of that. So thank you so much, Norman, because I think this is exactly what I hoped and more, because I didn't know as much of your history. And I can't wait for our next conversation in the summer when you've had the book come out and we can explore that and the reception to it, and maybe tell listeners a bit more about the journey you've been on. But this has been brilliant. I think for me, definitely, and hopefully loads of people listening, food for thought as to how we can really harness the power of being human within the construct of building fantastic organizations that humans happen to want to work in and do their best in, you know?
Yeah, my personal and soulful purpose is to help transform paradigm of business such that we are creating environments that work for the people, work for the business, work for the leaders, and most importantly, work for society overall. So
that's a great goal. That is a great goal. Well, good luck with that. And I can't wait to follow that progression, continue progression for decades and going with intense interest, because yeah, it fully aligns with the sort of holistic view, the humanistic view that I think is so needed and maybe not talked about enough. So thank you, and thank you once again. And we'll catch up very soon, all right?
yes, absolutely. Thank you so much, Kofi, for having me and for such a wonderful, stimulating conversation. I totally enjoyed it.
I hope
It gets a lot out of it.
all the time. Perfect. Well, have a great rest of your day. I'm starting to wind down. Got to go and feed this guy before he interrupts me more.
Get upset.
Exactly. Take care. Bye.